My guest today is Pam Frankforther, founder of Pioneer Reading Center in Wayne, Ohio, which is a microschool for students with dyslexia and other learning differences. Pam was a school teacher for, I guess, now continuing 20 years now, about 18 years in public district schools, public charter schools, as well as a few years in private schools, and is just launching Pioneer Reading Center this fall with several students already enrolled and more to come. So, Pam Frankforther, welcome to the Liberated Podcast.
Hi, Carrie. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
I'm excited to have you here. I was thrilled to get a message from you from the liberatedpodcast.com contact form where you introduced yourself and told me that you are opening this new microschool for homeschoolers in Ohio. And it just sounds like such a wonderful place. And you've just recently resigned from your role in the public schools to become an education entrepreneur, to become a school founder, and already have students enrolled, and you haven't even opened your doors yet, which will occur in a few weeks from now. So, just such an inspirational story. And I think something that my listeners and viewers will really appreciate. And as we were chatting before I went ahead and clicked record, you were telling me a little bit about the origin story for Pioneer Reading Center, which is really fascinating. You said several years ago you were listening to the popular podcast series Sold a Story, which was sort of revealing some of the inadequacies in how students in conventional schools are being taught reading. And I wonder if you can share a little bit more about that podcast series, what spoke to you about that, and then what it led to.
Sure. I have to say first, though, that your podcast was one of the first ones that I found when I went down the alternative ed wormhole. And I listened to every single episode that you featured a public school teacher leaving and starting their own business. So thank you for that. Um, my whole career, I've been interested in being a reading teacher. And this coming school year will be my 20th year. So I've been here for a while. And I just remember throughout my whole career, every year looking at data and just talking with my colleagues and going, something's wrong. Why we're not reaching all the kids? We're not teaching them all to read. Why is that? We're following the curriculum. We're doing what administration says. And there was always just a question of, what are we missing? And about 4 years ago, we found the answer with Sold a Story by Emily Hanford. One of my colleagues was like, you have to listen to this podcast. So I went home, I was folding laundry at home, and I remember just sitting on my bed and crying because I realized like, this is what we're missing. This is what public schools are not doing right. I listened to every single episode, right there in my room, and went back to school the next day with just like this fire to change what we were doing. And there was a group of us that really caught that bug. And we also had some training from our state. Ohio had science of reading training that we had to do. So we were armed with all this new information, and we really were trying to make change in our district.
Yeah, and so I would highly recommend listeners and viewers listen to the Sold a Story series. It's incredibly well done and insightful. What were
Yep.
some of the key takeaways, though, Pam, from that series that were eye-opening for you, for those who may not be familiar with it?
What was eye opening to me is that, first of all, teachers in our country are largely not taught the science of reading, which is, for those people that don't know, it's a whole body of research that's over 50 years old that lays out how people learn how to read and what are the best practices for that end. And teachers in their preparatory programs are not taught that. They're taught something that is almost the opposite, called balanced literacy, which basically means, oh, if you give all the kids lovely books and give them time to read, they will basically get it. And that's the opposite of what we need to do. So that really struck me hard. And I realized I was doing a lot of things wrong in the classroom. And I also realized that in order to teach kids the way that they need to be taught, you need to teach them explicitly and systematically. in all of the five foundational sections of reading. So I realized then listening to the podcast that not only do traditional schools they're not able to meet those needs for all the children. They're really not able to meet the needs of children that have dyslexia and learning differences that just need more time and more direction in learning how to read.
Yeah, again, a really wonderful series. In my unschooled book from 2019, I write a lot about natural literacy and homeschoolers
Mm-hmm.
and unschoolers learning outside of a conventional classroom. And I do think that there's more opportunity and sort of wiggle room for maybe a balanced literacy approach. But I think in a conventional system with a conventional curriculum, much more difficult to do that successfully. And to your point, this is why we're potentially seeing some of these lack of literacy skills, lack of reading skills in young people today. And that was really what led to a sense of urgency for you to make some changes. You tried to make changes within the system, like so many school teachers do. And what happened?
So there was a small group of us that were really trying to advocate for change. And at my last school, I was a reading intervention teacher. So I was able to work with K through 4, really. We had a team of 2 of us. And then this last year, there were 3 of us. And we were really trying to meet the needs of our students. So what we do is we'd take the beginning of the year reading data and we'd make groups and we'd try to focus on the kids with the highest need, which research shows that kindergarten and first grade are those grades that you really need to hit the hardest for the best bang for your buck, right? So we were doing that, and it was the beginning of last year. So it was last August, and we were excited to start a new school year. We had all this training under our belt. And behind our back, there was a group of teachers that made a new schedule for us that focused on state test prep. So these were older kids that didn't necessarily need foundational reading skill instruction. They were kids that those teachers were afraid would not pass the state test. Okay, so that whole thing just set my hair on fire. And I was like advocating, we need to focus on K1. Like, we are not test prep teachers. We're reading intervention teachers. Like, what's
Mhm.
happening? And I was basically told just stay in my lane and do what was, best for the school, which is test scores. So that didn't sit right with me.
Yeah. And then did you immediately say to yourself, I'm going to go start a school? Or what was that path to entrepreneurship like?
No, well, I am a pretty passionate person at my core. So I flipped my lid and I went into school the next day just, ready to fight. I wanted to, who are these teachers that made these groups, and why am I being made to do this? And why administration, why are you, why is this a thing? And that's when I was told to stay in my lane. And I went home. I remember I went home for lunch. My husband was at home and I was just bawling. And I'm not a crier either. I get mad. I don't cry. I was bawling and I'm like, I can't stay. I can't stay here and feel like I'm not doing what I was hired to do, and I'm not doing what's best for students. So that led down to, well, what's next for me?
Mm. And this was a public school district that you were in for many years, for like 8 or 9 years. Is
I
that
no,
right?
this one I was at this district for this was my 5th year, when
Fifth
last
year.
year was my 5th year at this
Okay.
district.
And
And this
eight
is the
total
district,
years in a district school. Yeah.
yes, this is the district where my husband and I moved. It's a rural community in
Mm.
Ohio, and my husband's family grew up here and went to school here. It's a really small rural district. I was thrilled to be hired there 5 years ago. My own
Mm.
student or my own children go to school there. So I thought this was like my dream job. So I was
Yeah.
really disappointed when I felt like it wasn't going to work out.
So this was last fall where you came home and were crying and
Yeah.
unsure what to do. What happened next?
So I did a lot of soul searching. Um, I looked around, but I just felt like, every school is going to have these kind of problems. Like, obviously, from the podcast and all of my digging, this isn't a problem unique to my position. So I knew it wasn't public school. And then one day I was talking to our special ed director, and she was like, why don't you tutor, open a business and tutor? She's like, you can do that. And she told me about the John Peterson scholarship, which is a scholarship here in Ohio.
One of
And
the school choice programs in Ohio. There's several that enable a portion of education funding to follow students. This one that you're talking about is for specifically for special needs students. Is that right?
it's a John Peterson special needs scholarship, and it's for students that are identified with special needs through their public school district. And if these students go to a private school or choose to homeschool, they can access the scholarship for funds for intervention services. So that was a whole wormhole. I was like, well, okay, I can have a business for intervention. And all this time I'm not a prayerful person, but I was raised Catholic. Okay. So I was praying for some guidance, just something to show me what the next step was. And the very next day, I had a random email from KaiPod. And I'm not
Wow.
affiliated with them in any way, but if somehow it ended up in
Yeah.
my inbox, and I was like, well, KaiPod, what's a microschool? So then I went down that whole wormhole. I found you. I found Mackenzie Oliver
Yes.
with Teachers Let Your
Teacher,
Light
let your
Shine.
light shine. Yep.
Yep. So I spent a couple months just figuring that thing out, and I was like, well, if I can open a tutoring business, I can open an educational business. I'm going to start my own school. So that's kind of where that went. I brought it to my husband. I'm like, I've been thinking about this for a while. Like, here's how I think it can work. And he's not in education. So he was like, well, all right, that sounds okay. I think you can do it. So that was it. So then I started going down the scholarship
Yeah.
information and how to become a provider, and started thinking about my school in that way.
Yeah, so you became a recognized provider for the
Mm-hmm.
scholarship program. You run the Pioneer Reading Center as a microschool for homeschoolers who are able to access the scholarship funds. And so you're not a state recognized private school. You run as sort of an education entity that enables scholarship funds to follow students to your program.
Yes.
You mentioned to me that you didn't want to go the private school or charter school route. I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about what appealed to you about this more micro school model.
I considered the charter school route, and there was just so much red tape, and I felt a little bit of a red flag. Like, I feel like all of this is going to end up with me just having to do certain things in my school, and have it end up look like a traditional school model.
Mhm.
And I knew I didn't want that, and so I looked more into the homeschool options. And in the state of Ohio, there's very little regulation for homeschool students. So obviously that can be a good thing and a bad thing. But the good that I see in it is parents that are looking for more intense intervention or more individualized instruction can find a business like me, and we can work together to give their kids the best education that they can possibly get.
Terrific. So, what were some of those startup steps? Because you were still working as a
Yeah.
public school teacher, as you're planning to launch this fall your new micro school. Um, you became a recognized provider for the scholarship. What were some
Mhm.
of those other pre-launch steps that you took? I imagine location, marketing, enrollment. Tell us a little bit about what the spring was like for you.
So in the late fall, like around Thanksgiving time, I realized I should probably start marketing and start telling people that I'm here. I did find a place for the school that fell into my lap. There's a church down the street from the district I was working in, and consequently right near my home, that has this beautiful family life center. So there's a
Mm,
giant cafeteria, there's a play area with games, there's a gymnasium, and this gorgeous classroom. So I went to the board of that church and asked for permission. They were all about it. They were
great.
fantastic. Yeah. So then it was turning in my resignation and starting announcing to everyone. And I had a Facebook page that was sort of vague and just sort of trying to draw people in, like, oh, something new is coming to our community, those kind of posts. And then when I turned in my resignation that very next day, I was like, I'm here, Pioneer School is here, and got a lot of interest that way on Facebook.
Yeah, what was the reaction, both from potential students and families, as well as maybe your colleagues in the conventional system?
I my there's, like I think I said, there's two groups of colleagues, right? So there were the colleagues that are, agents of change and working really hard to fight that system. And they were all, I consider them my friends. They were like, this is great. You're going to do a great job. And then administration said in the nicest way possible, you're crazy. But they were fine. They were like, thanks for your time here. Good luck to you. And then there were also a lot of my colleagues that were, they tried to involve the union and say that it was a conflict of interest, and which it wasn't. I did my due diligence.
Yeah.
So that was uncomfortable. It was an uncomfortable last couple of months, but I
Mhm.
just kept telling myself, I'm doing what's right for me. I'm doing what's right for what I think is going to be a lot of kids in the community. So I just kept my head down and finished out the year. So.
Yeah, and it must have been validating for you when you got your initial enrollments. You already have a handful of students signed up as you prepare to open your doors in a few weeks. Tell us a little bit about what was attracting families to Pioneer Reading Center.
Yes. So after I announced being a school here in the community, I scheduled an open house, and that was terrifying to me because I did have a lot of Facebook interest, but that doesn't always turn into real people and real life interest. So I had the open house scheduled, and I had 11 families show up, 10 or
Wow.
11 families. And it was a mix of public school families that were interested in something else. They were just tired of, fighting the system. And there was homeschool families too that were looking for help. So, and the amazing thing about that open house is I stood there, I gave my spiel, I had a whole Google slide, and then every single family waited to talk to me in person afterwards. They wanted someone to hear their struggle, their student struggle,
Yeah.
what they needed. And it was just, it filled my heart that there were people out there that were looking for something and that I might be able to help them find it.
Ah, amazing. So
So.
tell us about what this fall, what this first launch year will look like in terms of what is your expected enrollment as you kind of go through the fall in the first year. What are the grades that you're serving, curriculum? Give us a little bit of a sense of what to expect.
All the things. Sure.
Yeah.
So I have 4 full-time students and 2 part-time. My full-time students are accessing the John Peterson scholarship, so they have intervention needs that will need to happen. And my part-time students are my homeschoolers that just want either socializations or more like project. So my school day is going to run, the morning will be intervention in core subjects, and the afternoon will be project-based learning where they're able to dive into their passions and find the things they love about learning and do that. So one of my part-time students is coming just for the projects. The other one of my homeschool students is coming for intervention in core subjects. And then the other 4 kids will be with me all day long. So we're going to have a great time. Um, what else did you ask me about?
Well, let
Curriculum?
me just ask you there. Yeah, I want to talk about curriculum in a minute, but in terms of your students, so what are their grades or ages?
Oh, yes. I have 3rd grade through 7th grade.
Interesting. Okay.
And
Is that
when I
just how it
opened,
worked out? Yeah, I was going to say, is
that's
that
how it
just,
worked out. When I
yeah.
opened, I just assumed I would have a younger group of
Yeah.
students, but it's more of it's the parents with students who have been through the system a little bit
Yeah. Yeah.
and realized it's too frustrating or they need more help. And so I have an older crew. I was just going to take kindergarten through 6th, but I do have a 7th grader that I think will fit in beautifully. So
Okay.
it is going to be like a one room school model.
Yeah.
We're all going to learn together, and I've never done it before, but I think it's going to be fantastic. So I'm looking forward to that.
And are the scholarship students attending tuition free? Are the homeschool students as well? What is the financial picture like for families?
The families that access the scholarship are it most or all of the fees are paid for through that
Great,
scholarship. Yeah.
great.
So, and then private pay is they are paying privately.
Okay. And then what about the curriculum? So what have you thought about with this multi-age, one-room schoolhouse model? How is that going to work?
So I'm using Ebley for reading, writing, and spelling intervention. It's evidence-based literacy instruction, and I was recently trained on that. It's like Orton Gillingham's sister.
Okay.
It's without going into too much detail. It's Orton Gillingham is speech to print or print to speech, and Ebley is speech to print, and that's a
Mm,
whole conversation we could have. But it's it's researched and validated, and it's just as good, if not better, than Orton Gillingham. And so I went down that route.
mm,
Um, to piggyback onto that, I'm going to use CKLA for language. It is it's a reading program, but it's really heavy in science and social studies. So I think we're going to use that then to launch our projects
mm.
and things like that for the afternoon. And
And
then
what
for
about for math?
math,
Yeah.
we're going to use Khan Academy.
Hmm.
And I've not used that before either, except for the little dabbling I've been doing this summer. But I think it'll be great for individualizing their math
Mm.
needs.
Yeah. That's terrific. And so what is your sense in terms of enrollment growth? How many students, what would be your capacity for this first year? What is your expectation? It seems like there's already a lot of interest, so I imagine you'll be full before you know it. How high can you go in terms of enrollment?
There's already a lot of interest, and from listening to all of your previous
Mhm.
interviewees, it seems like they add people throughout their first year.
Right.
So I'm sort of planning for that. I think I would like to cap at 8 to 10 students. Right now, I'm the only employee. I do
Mm.
have people that are going to volunteer to come in during the week, but I don't think I want to think about adding more staff until maybe January or even next school year, just to kind of keep it small and figure out what we're doing and get a groove going.
Well, we'll see when that wait list starts to fill, Pam, and you feel like you want to serve more and more of these families who are clamoring for what you're offering. In fact, you told me that after our recording today, you were going on live TV to talk about Pioneer Reading Center, which I imagine is going to lead to even more interest
I hope
in
so.
what you're providing. And I wonder, are you seeing in Ohio more generally? More interest in unconventional education models? What are you seeing there?
I think, like everywhere, ever since COVID, there's been an interest. I think in our state, is there 1.5 million students who are homeschooled or go to a microschool? It's
Mm,
hard to track because there aren't a lot of laws behind tracking microschools. But there's tons of interest, and our governor just signed a bill just this month raising the amounts for the scholarships in Ohio. So I think with that, there will be a lot more interest of parents realizing that there's money out there for them to spend on their kids' education how they want.
mm. So what do you see, it's sort of the midterm and longer term path for Pioneer Reading Center? Say in the next 3 to 5 years, do you expect to add staff, grow out, maybe potentially outgrow your location? I guess what's your projection?
In my wildest dreams, my goal is to find an old church or an old farmhouse and turn that into a school, and maybe have some more land to work with. I would like to have I would love to have more staff and have something that's substantial that can serve the most people that we can in this community. I think I mentioned we're in a rural community, and there's not a lot of school choice that's not a 45-minute to an hour drive from a lot of the families that live here. So I would like to become a substantial option for people that are interested.
Yeah, and maybe let me ask a little bit about that, probe that a little bit further, because there aren't as many options in rural communities, although entrepreneurs like you are building them and expanding those options. But I imagine, Pam, that you're going to get families who are really attracted to the microschooling model, innovative education, who may not necessarily have a student with dyslexia or reading challenges, but like the microschool model. How have you thought about how you might accommodate that, or are you going to sort of stay focused on this being a literacy, kind of dyslexia focused microschool? Just how do you, the larger
Yeah.
question is, how do you sort of stay focused on your mission and your target population while also being responsive to larger demand in your community?
Yes, which is a fine line
Yeah.
because since schools aren't very ready to diagnose dyslexia, there's a lot of kids out there that are undiagnosed and they still have the problems that kids with diagnosed dyslexia have, but they don't have the special needs IEP in
Mm,
place to back it up to allow for funds. So I've already tried to help a lot of families, a few anyways. They say, I would love to come to your school, but my kid does not have an IEP. I think they would qualify.
mm,
What are my next steps? So I've helped parents navigate that. I actually wrote a book. I don't know if I mentioned that to you. My thing, I forgot because when I resigned, I was like, I finally know what I want to write a book about. I want to write a book about how difficult it is for families to navigate the special education system in public education. They have no idea where to start, what the meetings mean, any of that. So I wrote a book called Dyslexia in the Public Schools, and it's sort of a tell all about the behind the scenes, what's happening in the schools, why parents can't get help, and how to navigate that. So I gave some of these parents that were interested in the school, here's an email template. Email this to the special ed director. Let's find that person's email. Send this. This is what happens next, and start them in that process where otherwise they wouldn't know who to reach out to.
mm.
Um, so I have two families in the works of their children are being tested and they're hoping to get that diagnosis so that they can access the John Peterson scholarship and come with me.
Mm.
Did that
Yes.
answer your question?
Yes, for sure. And again, the title of your book is Dyslexia and the Public Schools, What They Don't, Can't, or Won't Tell You, and Steps to Take to Advocate for Your Child's Needs. I'll put the Amazon link in the show notes. And I also think just for the founders listening, prospective founders listening, it's also a potentially worthwhile act to publish a book and to sort of claim your role as an expert in whatever kind of educational philosophy or mission you're working from, because that can attract more families to you. It can attract media, your
Yeah, like
television
you did, right? I
spotlight.
mean,
Yeah,
we write
yeah.
books.
Yeah. So, but even as an entrepreneur, it's a great sort of marketing and media strategy for positioning yourself as the go-to
Yes,
expert in your community and beyond. So that's really exciting. So
yes.
on that note, what advice would you have for other prospective founders, maybe other public school teachers who are maybe about to start another year as a conventional school teacher, but are starting to think about going off on their own and launching their own microschool? What advice would you give to them?
I would say, like many of your other previous interviewees, just do it. Just do it. You have the tools in your mind. You have the guts to do it. You can do it. I One of my favorite quotes is Mary Oliver. What is it will you do with your one wild and precious life? And that's sort of the crossroads that got me to take the leap of faith. I didn't want to be in a job my whole life that I was miserable in. And I would say to other people, you don't have to be miserable in your job either. You can take the tools and the skills that you have and you can make something fabulous for yourself and for your students.
Oh,
So
I
just do
love
it.
that. I love that. It's so great. So, Pam, how can others reach you, learn more about Pioneer Reading Center, follow your first year journey as an education
Yeah.
entrepreneur? What can they do?
Yes. So I'm mostly on Facebook, Pioneer Reading Center. I do have TikTok and Instagram. Same thing, Pioneer Reading Center. those are my more unhinged posts about public schools. So that's just more of my personal views of regular education. My Facebook posts or Facebook page is where you'll find more information about the school. And then I also have a website, pioneerreadingcenter.com.
Mm. And
That's
I
all
was
the
gonna,
information.
yeah, I was gonna wrap up there, but you made me think of something when you talked about some of your rants on conventional education. Do you think that conventional education, conventional schooling can and will change, especially with the competition from microschool founders like you? Or do you think that that's not something we'll see in the near future?
That's a great question. I hope that public schools will change. A lot of my colleagues at the school I was at recently think that I'm giving up on that public school, which is not the case. I still would like to be an advocate for public school change. I've read all about Steubenville, Ohio. I'm sure you're familiar with that district in Ohio, that they reach 95 to 100% of their students at reading level every year for the last 20 years. So I don't think it would be a difficult change for public schools to reach that percentage of children. I think it just takes focus, and maybe with a little bit of fire from micro schools like mine, maybe
Hmm.
they will realize they have to step up their game. So I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful for kids in public schools and kids everywhere that they get what they need.
Hmm. Well, I am looking forward to following your journey, having you back on the podcast to reflect on
Yes.
your entrepreneurial startup. And just best wishes, Pam, for a really successful and impactful year ahead. Thanks so much for being on the Liberated podcast.
Thank you so much, Carrie. I appreciate it.